Welcome to everyone that's joining so far. We're just going to go ahead and wait a couple of minutes just to let everyone join, and then we'll get started with the presentation. Thank you. So I think it's time for us to go ahead and get started. Hi everyone, welcome to this Kiuwan webinar. Thank you so much for being in attendance today. Today we're going to help you identify the key trends in cyber threats and develop a targeted approach to mitigate the risk of these trends for your business. We'll start by exploring the three main trends in recent cyber threats, examine the role of the digital transformation, and consider the importance of application security within your security stack. And we will finish by highlighting how the Kiuwan solution can fit into a robust security plan and provide some direct insight into our platform as well. So without further ado, here is the event agenda. We'll start by looking at the key trends in cyber threats, why the digital transformation matters, examine the role of application security testing, and then finally finish up with how Kiuwan can help and take any questions that you might have as well. So, key trends in cyber threats for 2021. In 2021, we're facing a dynamic landscape as it pertains to the challenges and the risks of cyber threats. Organizations are really struggling to overcome some of the wide gaps that exist within their security posture and leverage limited processes to protect their operations. With more than half the year already behind us, the cyber threat landscape is starting to really take shape. There's already a surprising degree of consensus as to the threats that pose the most significant and pernicious dangers, but the vast majority of businesses are underprepared for the risks at hand. The Hiscox Cyber Readiness Report recently stated that 73% of companies are not adequately prepared for a cyber attack. That's a very significant majority. In fact, most businesses rely on the lessons from failures to improve the outcomes. But when the average cost of a data breach is almost $4 million, waiting for a lesson to change that approach might be too costly. But cybersecurity is definitely not monolithic. With the ever-expanding IoT, the range of access points for breaches has never been more diverse, and hackers can take advantage of built-in vulnerabilities, weaknesses in third-party code, obsolescence, and network security issues to access and subvert the critical data that you're keeping about your customers or your products, for example. And it's really essential for businesses to take a proactive approach and protect their applications and infrastructure cyber threats. So a recent survey highlights the severity of the cyber risk in 2021. As you can see, 42% of technology leaders believe that their business is at risk from a material cyber attack in 2021. And when we focus only on those in banking and finance, that number increases to 50%. The sentiment across all industries, especially those that prioritize data security, is very clear. And cyber threats are becoming a virulent challenge for businesses that rely on applications, which at this point is almost all businesses. So much has changed during 2020 and 2021 that's driving leaders to reconsider the importance of a holistic approach to cybersecurity. And cyber breaches can be damaging not only to an organization's infrastructure, but also to its long-term reputation. You don't just lose customers after a cyber attack, you also lose all of the credibility as it pertains to your brand, and a lot of trust that those customers might have, as well as partners and different things like that. But only 61% of organizations already have a framework for quantifying cybersecurity risk. So with that said, it's essential for decision makers to analyze the critical aspects of cybersecurity and really start to prioritize some effective strategies that can help them optimize a holistic approach to cybersecurity, which will also enable them to build robust countermeasures. So there are 3 emerging threats for business leaders to focus on as we progress through 2021, and those are the expanding cyber attack surface, the prevalence of ransomware, and threats posed to infrastructure. So let's dive right into it. The expanding cyber attack surface. So vulnerabilities in code are ripe for exposure to attacks. It seems pretty self-explanatory. Hackers are able to leverage the smallest vulnerabilities in code to breach data and take access from software platforms. And a great example of this is the recent Kaseya breach. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this, but on July 2nd, the Kaseya platform suffered a supply chain attack that had broad reach across their business, affecting actually around 1,500 businesses worldwide that were using their services. Code vulnerabilities were exposed and leveraged to launch a ransomware attack. The specific vulnerability came in the form of a customer service portal vulnerability that had actually existed since 2015, the portal. 5 years of, including a ticking time bomb in an application's code. So Kaseya actually had control over the code and were of course affected, but this vulnerability also exposed an array of connected platforms, and as a result, a lot of different data sources as well. The specific vulnerability was highlighted in the CVE 2021 30.11.6 and assigned a vulnerability number on April 2nd, 2021. So this indicated that Kaseya had roughly 3 months to address this vulnerability before it could be exploited by bad actors. If only they had been using application security testing, they might have been able to flag this at an earlier point. But the Kaseya attack merely scratches the surface of the issue at large. The cyber attack surface is growing even larger. By the end of 2025, the world will store over 200 zettabytes of data. And the factors that influence this rapid data addition are propagated by the increasing need to operate in remote environments. Digital transformation has become an essential facet for businesses trying to compete in a globally expanding marketplace. And the expanding risk surface has only served to empower hackers. By 2025, it's expected that there'll be more than 30 billion IoT devices. Hackers have a multitude of options to breach cyber defense and exfiltrate data. Supply chain cyber attacks can be perpetrated by a range of different stakeholders, and the goal is really just to breach the weakest link in the chain. So that could be your business, or it could be a business you're partnered with, or services that you use. So with the ever-expanding software development lifecycle and extensive networks of devices, platforms, and communities that business participate in, protecting such a broad surface is really not an easy task anymore, especially when there are so many varying types, security standards, and devices. One vulnerability in the entire infrastructure can be enough to risk the failing of the application and risk the data that might be contained in it. So one interesting aspect of the aforementioned attack is that the specific portal that was accessed had actually been deprecated in 2018 because it was no longer used by their customers. But hackers were still able to access the page and take advantage of the vulnerability. And the critical consideration here is that applications, solutions, and networks are only going to continue to expand further. And with the cost of that specific attack being 70 million, it can be very clear that this is an issue that is only going to get worse and really will cost a lot of money for businesses that are underprepared. So yeah, it really represents a dangerous threat for software businesses and those that leverage software solutions within their tech stack. Software supply chain attacks involve targeting third-party software or suppliers as an end around against normal security precautions. In the earlier example, this was a deprecated portal, but other prominent examples come to mind, whether it was the SolarWinds attack. We have a great blog on that on the Kiuwan website, so make sure to read that. Or the Microsoft Exchange attacks that were primarily focused on financial gain and creating technical advantages. Supply chain attacks were up 430% in 2020 when compared to 2019. And the data that we're seeing so far is showing that it's only accelerating into 2021. The main strength of supply chain attacks is that they leverage novelty and the presence of general trust between suppliers and customers. So the existing perception is that a trusted supplier takes the necessary precautions to ensure the safety and security of their software. But in practice, it's obviously very difficult to actually keep a very high standard and ensure that the safety and security of an application is maintained. The problem is actually so extensive on the supply side because your tier one service providers also themselves have tier one service providers and leverage resources that may not be directly visible to you. CSO Online actually notes that only 34% of risk professionals say they believe vendors that guarantee security of their software, but there's just really no silver bullet solution for preventing an attack. So these promises, they fall flat, to be honest. Yeah, and we'll dive into this more later, especially as it pertains to supply chain attacks. So with the increasing expansion of the industrial Internet of Things, cyber flaws can only be expected to increase. IoT devices and the extensive software supply chain are making networks considerably less secure. Many are connected to secure business networks without comprehension that new devices are expanding the network and need additional considerations and security practices to be put in place. But with businesses of all sizes leveraging external hardware and software that plugs directly into their applications, prioritizing security around external code and identifying potential vulnerabilities from software and hardware integrations is really essential to avoid the risk of cyber attacks. Moving on to the next item, which is ransomware as a weapon of choice. So in 2020, ransomware actually comprised nearly a quarter of threats identified by threat intelligence groups. Digital transformations have really made ransomware attacks a weapon of choice for hackers. The transformation of so many companies has created a further range of targets for extortion. And ransomware typically involves a software install that encrypts entire systems via malware and requires owners of affected systems to purchase decryption keys at extortionate prices. Recent high-profile attacks include the Colonial Pipeline and Acer Inc. attacks. They featured demands of more than $50 million, increasingly involving exfiltration of data to the attacker. So the risk driven by the threat just really keeps escalating. So as a result, ransomware represents a critical and ever riskier prospect for businesses, and all the while it's only becoming a more popular method. Ransomware attacks were actually up 435% during 2020. So while ransomware is not directly preventable by application security, ensuring that you keep your software at the latest update levels can really help. Patches can be a great first step to preventing the threats of ransomware, but there are additional requirements that brands have to really improve their cybersecurity awareness, be more prepared, and then build anti-malware programs into their infrastructure. Ransomware is such a powerful weapon for cyber criminals because they really empower hackers to take control of a company's data and then use it to leverage and further extort the business. They really want to recover their data, so that's a huge item of value that hackers are able to leverage to ensure that they get paid. The National Security Institute actually estimates that a ransomware attack occurs about every 11 seconds, which seems pretty incomprehensible, but it's really evolved into a multi-billion-dollar industry. And the venture is only going to keep growing as long as there is an expanding opportunity. Like any market, there will always be people that want to take advantage of that and make a profit. So the increase in sophistication and strength of these attacks has led to a significant increase in the cost of recovery. This year so far, the average recovery cost is 1.85 million, just a huge amount of money, with the average ransom paid at $170,404. This cost is just far too high for businesses of any size to sustain, and CTOs and leadership teams really need to solidify their strategic approach to ensure that they're able to prevent the risk of these sorts of attacks and everything like that. So in the health sector specifically, which is a great example of an industry that really can't afford to risk playing with customer data, there are a total of 82 ransomware incidents so far in 2021. This was actually written about a week ago, so by now I'm certain that there have been more. And 48 of these ransomware incidents have impacted the United States healthcare sector specifically. So the primary targets for these attacks are health and medical clinics, as well as healthcare industry services. They're particularly vulnerable sub-industries since they leverage so much customer data. The risk of having the data accessed and leveraged for malicious purposes is really very significant. No one wants their medical details to be accessible on the internet, right? So it's very important that they're protected. In fact, only 69% of hacked companies had their data restored even after the ransom was paid. So there's no direct correlation between paying the ransom and actually getting your data back. It's still a risk on both sides. So secure data is really just a valuable target for hackers because they can sell this data as well as obviously getting the ransom money as well. So there's a lot less risk for them in pursuing these types of attacks. But on the side of businesses, there's really only one solution, and it's just trying to be more proactive and embedding application security into the development process. John Reed Stark, he's a cybersecurity consultant and former chief of the SEC Commission Office of Internet and Enforcement. It's a long job title for sure. Said it best that ransomware attackers are by definition liars, thieves, extortionists, and members of a global criminal enterprise. They take extreme technological measures to conceal any trace of their identity and their location. And obviously with the advent of cryptocurrencies and the increase in popularities of those types of payments as a form of propagating the ransomware attacks, it makes it pretty easy for these types of hackers to keep their presence unknown, operate under the radar, and still continue to get paid for their ransoms. So there's no solution. There's not really any government entities that are going to be able to step in to reclaim your data without inevitable damage or inconvenience and probably cost as well. So it's truly on your business to effectively protect itself. But there are a few powerful solutions, including requiring multi-factor authentication for remote access. Obviously, we all know that this has become increasingly popular, but it is for good reason. It makes it a lot difficult for hackers to gain access to your accounts. Enabling strong spam filters to prevent phishing emails. We've all clicked on a phishing email or two in our times, so just ensuring that there are really good protections against those getting through can just reduce the risk, because it is almost inevitable that someone will click on one of those links. Implementing user training, that's a pretty self-sufficient point right there. Filtering network traffic, obviously any types of communications that are able to get on, any types of unwanted communications that are able to get onto your network can be damaging, so mitigating that as much as possible is definitely a benefit. And then updating software, including operating systems, applications, and firmware. Staying up to date will help to ensure that you have the best security posture built in to your tech stack, really. But ultimately, by taking a proactive approach and securing your approach, combined with an effective response plan, can help businesses to mitigate the risks of ransomware attacks. Not completely prevent them, but definitely mitigate some of the risks and challenges. And obviously, backing up data regularly is going to be huge to mitigating, having to pay those ransoms. If you still have the data, it's not always a huge concern. So moving on to threats for critical infrastructure. As a lot of you probably know, many of the high-profile attacks in 2021 have been directly against critical infrastructure, whether that's pipelines, electric power grids, healthcare, utility, or communication infrastructure. But it's a key access point for hackers. They're trying to get into the critical infrastructure, and they're able to use the code development supply chain, errors, third-party vulnerabilities, governance and compliance issues, as well as obsolescence within the software, can all increase code exposure. And obviously these are resources that are in high demand for attacks, because being able to get control of pipelines, meat factories, things like that, can provide a huge ability to generate ransom income. So attacks on critical infrastructure really present novel and sophisticated scenarios that can put entire industries at risk. In today's connected environments, the conversion of digital and physical systems has really created a slew of new cybersecurity concerns. And researchers found that a hypothetical attack on the US could lead to a 70 to 90% casualty rate within just 12 months. That's why having critical infrastructure protection plan is crucial for businesses, obviously, as well as government entities that are trying to protect critical systems as well. But organizations of all sizes are already leveraging open source within their applications. But the concern is, as these applications age, they start to present more risks. There are more risks of obsolescence challenges. These are becoming more prevalent. Most organizations don't really track their open source components, so there might not be a system in place to monitor where those are used, how they're used, how often they're updated, and that sort of thing. But without this internal infrastructure, it can be difficult to stay on top of how these elements are integrated into your applications. And there can be a lot of risks to the aforementioned challenges, as we said. But the average application already includes hundreds of open source components. Developers can often keep these components in their workspaces for years, with hundreds of poorly tracked components and new vulnerabilities emerging each day. Many organizations are just pre-exposed to potential exploitation. So it's really critical to start reevaluating the way that we think about open source and making sure that these components are regularly checked and evaluated. Traditional OT systems such as human management interfaces and programmable logic computers are increasingly connected to both the network and other aspects of the infrastructure. So organizations need to use content delivery networks and web application firewalls, as well as share crucial resources with administrators while performing regular security audits in order to identify and protect against vulnerabilities. But web application attacks are not really the only risk for businesses. Command injection and parameter manipulations are also risks for businesses. Query and command injections are one of the most significant vulnerabilities that exist. And command injection attacks can occur when unverified user-controlled input is passed as valid input for execution calls. The danger occurs when dynamically built commands are leveraged by an attacker to perform arbitrary execution on underlying operating systems. So definitely a big risk for businesses and just another aspect to consider. So now that we've reviewed those three major threats, let's go ahead and look at how the role of the digital transformation is really playing a part here. So remote work has really served to enhance the risk for businesses. While it's provided a lot of flexibility, it also increases the challenges that are faced in ensuring that there is a comprehensive security posture. And given the recent pivot in working habits to accommodate remote work scenarios, hackers have increased and enhanced their attempts to compromise remote access. Online meeting platforms like Zoom, for example, have been the focus of research and reporting for zero-day vulnerabilities since mid-2020. In April 2020, a white hat discovery team actually earned a $200,000 prize because they were able to find a vulnerability within the Zoom application, which to some degree is slightly scary because Zoom is one of the most commonly used platforms. I guarantee almost everyone that's on this webinar has used Zoom or has Zoom on their computer right now. So with the prevalence of these types of things, it is very risky, and most businesses are exposed to some degree or another. The increased adoption of digital technology driven by the pandemic, along with some of the changing trends in the way that we use networks and digital platforms, combined with the expanding opportunities that are driven by revolutionary technologies and tools, it's only really enhancing the opportunity for hackers to take advantage of innate vulnerabilities in the way users are engaging with solutions. So most security teams are already complaining that their corporate leaders do not recognize the threat level that insecure digital assets pose to both their brand assets as well as the infrastructure as well. And 82% of IT security and C-level executives have already experienced at least one data breach when implementing new technologies and expanding their supply chain. So it's pretty common as companies are starting to digitize that they face some of these issues. The complexity of a distributed application architecture brought on by the digital transformation, it really continues to challenge even the largest security operations. And as a result of the rapid digital transformation, cybersecurity postures may really need to be updated and adjusted to support the increased complexity. The major uptick in remote work setups and digital businesses is really pushing organizations to apply secure access no matter where their users, applications, or devices are located. And studies are actually showing that a large proportion of people that are working from home will inevitably stay that way in the long term. And it's really altering the way that IT teams have to approach security. They now have to manage, safeguarding employees, facilities, data, reputation, and products, now across a distributed network as well. So this mix of on-premise and private cloud systems only serves to make data security an even greater challenge, and scaling security across internal and external networks will inexorably be difficult for businesses as well. Dr. Abel Sanchez of MIT put it pretty well, if a bit bluntly, when he said, "The battle being fought is moving faster than our decision cycle. If you're moving slower, then you are relevant from a leadership perspective." And while it is highly critical, it does make a lot of sense. IT leaders really have to keep up with the pace of change here, especially as it pertains to the risks and challenges that are consistently emerging. Investments in infrastructure really are pointless if your security stance is not ready to keep up with the challenges that you'll face from these investments. And security leaders need to be prepared for the additional risk that the digital transformation presents. The most difficult element is adding security at the speed of the digital transformation and ensuring that security spans every new internal digital process, as well as the external products that's developed. The center of the solution is the culture and the embedded processes that govern the IT infrastructure. The true answer here is baking security into the design and implementation process. So then moving on to the final topic here, which is the role of application security. So in early 2021, Forrester Research put out their State of Application Security report. And one of the most interesting takeaways that I found is that attacks on web applications are still the most common form of attack, specifically injections and cross-site scripting. From SQL injections to supply chain attacks, the list of vulnerabilities and opportunities for bad actors to gain access to your applications, customer data, and more is extensive. One of the key reasons for the weakness of applications is open source code, with thousands of vulnerabilities being identified per year according to our own software. A consistent growth in the way open source is leveraged is only serving to increase the risk of external threats and the vulnerabilities present within applications. One of the more interesting facts in regards to vulnerability creation is the stage at which vulnerabilities are created. 37.9% are created within data processing, with access control and resource management being the next highest ranking issues. It's clear that cyber attacks are a wide-ranging threat, and the exposure of these vulnerabilities can be a major risk for businesses. Applications are clearly a key focus for hackers, just because they provide so much value if they can be accessed. Every aspect of a company's information system is a potential target for a hacker, and as services are secured, hackers will just identify new vulnerabilities, and businesses continue to add more services that therefore increase their vulnerabilities, and it sort of just becomes a vicious cycle that continues to propagate risks for development teams and customers as well. But there's really one clear thing here that we have to all accept, is that there's no cookie cutter solution for application security. Every business is going to have a different approach to vetting solutions prior to their release, and that's needed based on what they're trying to achieve. So identifying the best approach for improving your application requires comprehension of the holistic nature of the attack surface. Application security tools, though, are perhaps the golden ticket. While they're not a perfect solution, AppSec tools offer an effective method for businesses to identify known vulnerabilities and categorize results. Finding trends and patterns are critical to assist businesses in managing the risks within applications, because breaches often exploit the application layer to access systems. Application security tools are critical for improving application layer security. AppSec tools help developers to find errors, vulnerabilities, and obsolescence during the build and release phases. One of the biggest trends of 2021 is that security programs will focus more on integrating tools that help developers avoid the mistakes that lead to vulnerabilities, rather than just detecting the software flaws leading to those vulnerabilities. In the past, tools have typically been used just at the end of the development cycle. SaaS testing, for example, has been less focused on making applications better, but rather about finding all of the security issues. So rather than finding ways to identify application security issues, we really need to bake security into the applications. Vulnerability and obsolescence detection will, continue to inform the threat model that can be used to guide developers as they build, rather than taking a reverse approach. So one critical aspect of application security that we've touched on, but we should expand on a bit more, is the use of open source components. So libraries and components within the development process that pertain to third-party resources are pretty much ubiquitous. 99% of applications have at least one open source component. That seems like an unbelievable statistic, but Yeah, very, very interesting. And one third of vulnerabilities disclosed in 2019 were in open source products. This is a trend that has continued over 2020 and into 2021 as well. So determining which open source components are secure really needs to be a primary concern for any application security group. But ultimately, the onus is on development teams. You have to provide the plumbing that can determine whether something you're going to bring in will pose a risk to the enterprise. In the end, companies need to make software not only more secure, but more resilient as well. This means security groups have to work with developers to create an environment that produces better, more efficient software that can protect businesses and users. Processes are essential for businesses to create a more efficient approach to designing and building software as well. So that takes us on to the final section, which is how Kiuwan can help your business build more secure applications. So a code weakness or misconfiguration within an application can cause a vulnerability that can be leveraged by hackers to launch an attack. This can have a lot of serious consequences for businesses, including losing control of an application, loss of control of a hosting server, loss of customer data, or use by bad actors as well, and brand and website damage. All of these are pretty significant and can result in a lot of effort to recover from, but also a lot of cost as well. And recent cyber breaches really prove that out. They've cost companies millions of dollars, not only including damage to brands, reputations, and partnerships, but it's costly in general and can be very difficult and timely for companies to recover. Discovering application vulnerabilities early and maintaining strong security practices is now more crucial than ever. So with that said, Kiuwan is an industry-leading platform designed to secure development operations at really every stage of the pipeline. The platform leverages effective static application security testing and source code analysis to identify vulnerabilities and provide targeted remediations to secure your code. Kiuwan provides 3 key attributes to help your development team secure your code. We comply with major security standards, so you can stay aligned with security standards, scan your code using a set of 4,000 plus rules based on key industry standards as listed right there. Based on key industry standards, including CWE, Sounds 25, and OWASP Top 10. And Kiuwan also supports all common programming languages to ensure complete application security. Kiuwan also integrates with your pipeline. Kiuwan code security fits seamlessly into your CI toolchain to add application vulnerability scanning directly into your development pipeline. Makes it a lot easier and helps you to identify vulnerabilities early in the application lifecycle and easily remediate them very quickly. And finally, we help you to manage your open source risk. You can automate tracking of open source components used within your applications, discover if your application code is exposed to risk from known vulnerabilities, identify obsolete versions and licensing issues. Known vulnerabilities are all pulled from the NIST as well to ensure that every single vulnerability is exposed. So with that all said, there are a range of handouts that are included here for you to take home and examine our products further. We also included an ebook for you to learn a bit more about why businesses need application security testing, and the slide deck is also downloadable there for you to take home as well. We would love if you requested a free trial or a demo of Kiuwan. You can do that by navigating to our website and selecting request a demo, and our wonderful sales team would be happy to get in touch with you. And also make sure to follow us, follow our page on LinkedIn. Just search for Kiuwan and stay connected with us there to hear more about future webinars and just gain access to additional content. But with that said, I'll stick around for 10 minutes to take any questions that you might have. We also have our great sales engineer, JD, on the line, and he can really help answer any specific product questions that you might have. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them now or put them in the chat as needed. Yes, Raul, we will be sharing the recording as well as the presentation. Last call for any questions that you might have. If not, we'll be wrapping up here in just under a minute. Okay, well, thank you to everyone for joining. If you do have any further questions, feel free to email us at contact@kiuwan.com. Also, make sure to visit www.kiuwan.com to learn more about our products. We will be sending out the recording as well as the slides from today, and it will also be accessible via our website if you don't happen to get the email. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll have another webinar next month.